So the root of the problem is we're going to be looking at what the factors are and what the solutions are when we factor it. So these are going to be set equal to 0. To start off with, we're going to go ahead and factor. And we're going to be looking at, we're going to be factoring is one of the first steps. So I want us to go ahead and practice multiplying so we can see how the box works. So when we're factoring, we're remembering how these pieces came into being. So why don't you, I'm going to pause it now, and y'all can go ahead and factor, multiply these, and then we'll check answers here in a minute. So when we're multiplying these, we're putting the numbers, the binomials, on the outside and working our way into the graph. And so when we're working our way in, on this first one, we have the x plus 1 and the x plus 2. And so when you multiply that corner, what'd you come up with? X squared. And then we had 2x and 2. So our answer was x squared plus 3x plus 2. And so the sum of those was the center number. What do you notice about both of the cross products? What is x squared times 2? 2x squared. What's 1x times 2x? 2x squared. The products are always going to match. So diagonal products are always going to match. And the upward moving diagonal, the sum of that is going to equal the middle term. So in the next one we had x plus 4, and it really doesn't matter if you went the same way I did or not, and x minus 5. So when we do x times x, that gives us x squared. X times 4 gives us 4x. X times negative 5 gives you negative 5x. And negative 5 times positive 4 gives us a negative 20. So we can check our diagonals. We have a negative 20x squared and a negative 20x squared in both diagonals, so that matches. When we combine, we end up with x squared, the sum of the diagonals, which is negative x, minus 20. And this diagonal is what created that centerpiece. Now, when we're looking at this, what do you notice is different in the bottom right-hand corner than what we had last time? Bottom right-hand corner. So that would be the negative 20 and the 2 that we're looking at. It's negative. And when it was negative, we had one of our two binomials will have a minus sign in it. These signs will match, the same as these signs. Okay, so let's do the next one. 2x minus 3, and then x minus 4. What'd you get for the top right-hand corner?
2x.
Okay. 2x times negative 4x, or negative 4, gives us a negative 8x. X times negative 3 gives you a negative 11. Excuse me, a negative, I know where my brain's going and it's getting there faster than what we're doing. Negative 3x. Negative 4 times negative 3 is a positive 12. We check our diagonals. Do both diagonals multiply to give you the same thing. 2x squared times 12 gives us 24x squared. Negative 3x and negative 8x give us a positive 24x squared. So they both match. And so we have x squared, and then negative 3 minus 8 is negative 11x plus 12. So even though both of these were negative, which made, because this closest sign was negative, our last one is positive because when you multiply two negatives, it comes with a positive. So you can have the negative middle term and still have a positive product. That just means you're multiplying two negatives. So the last one we had x plus 2 squared. So I know what to put on one of them. What do I put on the other one? Same thing. It's squared. So it gives you x squared, 2x, 2x, and 4. So x squared plus 4x plus 4. So these were all ones that we were just multiplying. The reason I wanted us to start here is I wanted us to be able to take, and here in a minute when we get to factoring, we're going to be going from the inside of the box out. So we'll be going backwards. I'll give you what we circled, and y'all are going to give me what would go on the sides. Okay? So before we go into those, let's just solve some ones that don't have to be factored. So anytime it's in one of these formats, there are other ways you can actually solve it. So if it's in one of these four formats, which we're going to go through all four of them, you won't have to factor it to be able to see it. And so what you want to do is you want to get your squared term by itself first. That means move everything else away from it and leave it isolated. So like on this one, here's my squared term. What do I need to move? (27 plus 9 is 36. X squared is equal to 36. What number times itself is 36? What's the other number that times itself is 36? Positive 6 is 1. Negative 6. Another way to write this is plus or minus 6. And when you're doing these for homework, I want you to write them in order from least to greatest. So you would write negative 6, comma, positive 6. Now on B, when I get my square term isolated, it's this whole parenthesis. So it's already isolated. So the next thing is I'm taking, when I was asking that question, what number times itself? That's square rooting. So I'm square rooting both sides. What number times itself is 121? Mm-hmm. 11. And I would recommend, just for your speed purposes and not getting frustrated trying to find things, having the squares of 1 through 15 memorized. It makes it easier for y'all to factor. It makes it easier for you to do different things we'll be doing throughout the year. And so that means like 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, and so forth. Being familiar with 1 through 15 will help you as we're going throughout the year. So it's 11 is what it's equal to, but is that the only thing it's equal to? Negative 11. And so x equals, we need to subtract that 3 from both sides, 8. If I subtract the 3 from both sides here, I come up with negative 14. So when there is something in the parenthesis with it, it's not like when you just have the term squared. You're actually going to have two different absolute values. It's not going to be like the positive 6, negative 6, positive 7, negative 7. It's going to be two distinctive different magnitudes. Is my square root by itself? Or is my square by itself?
No.
What needs to be moved and how do I move it? Divide by 3 on both sides. So 16 is equal to x minus 1, that quantity squared. How would I undo that square or get this? We're going to square root both sides. So what number times itself is 16? Both positive and negative of 4. And so we're going to solve each of those. X minus 1 is equal to the positive 4. X minus 1 is equal to the negative 4. Add 1 to both sides. X is equal to 5. Add 1 to both sides. X is equal to negative 3. And so when I write my answer, it's going to be negative 3, comma 5. On this next one, I have two different things connected to my squared term. I have the 1/2 and I have the negative 18. Which one gets moved first? The 18, we move the addition and subtraction first. And so we're going to move that 18 by adding it to both sides. 1/2 is equal to x plus 5 squared. Or 1/2 times x plus 5 squared is equal to 18. Now what do I need to move? Okay, how can I move the half? Divide by 1/2. When I divide by a half, what happens? It multiplies by 2. We keep the numerator, we change to multiplication, and we flip our denominator. And over here, that just cancels out. So we have x plus 5, that quantity squared, is equal to 36. So, when I take the square root of both sides, what number times itself is 36? So, positive and negative 6. X plus 5 is equal to positive 6. X plus 5 is equal to negative 6. X is equal to 1. And x is equal to negative 11. And so these problems were pretty much just isolating that square term, taking that square root, and then continuing to solve if I need to. Oscar went about it a little bit different. What did Oscar do that was different? So you might look back at your 1A, because it's the same question. What did he do different than us?
He subtracted 27.
He moved the 27 instead of moving the 9. So he brought everything to the same side. If you're ever going to factor, you need everything on the same side. And the reason you can factor is if you have two numbers that are being multiplied and the answer is 0, what do we know about one of those numbers? What does one of those numbers have to be? What is the only way to get a 0 product? One of the two numbers has to be 0. So if the product is 0, that means one of those two numbers is 0. We don't know which one. And so you're going to set each of those factors equal to 0. So let's see how he factored this. So we had the x squared, and he had the negative 36. We know the two products are going to match. So we know that it needs to be negative 36 x squared. There is no middle term. So that means when they add, they need to cancel out. What two things can multiply to give us a negative 36 that will add to give me 0? So a negative 6x and a positive 6x. And so that negative 6x and positive 6x are out in the opposite sides. And so when I'm looking through this, what can be brought out of both x squared and 6x? The x. What can be brought out of negative 6x and negative 36? And negative 6 because the sign closest is negative. What can be brought out of both x squared and negative 6x? What can be brought out of both 6x and negative 36? 6. And it is positive this time because the one closest is positive. And so that's where he came up with these two factors, x minus 6 and x plus 6. So we're going to take time and we're actually going to work through some of these. So unlike the previous one, where I can actually get the x squared by itself and take the square root and solve, I have a middle term. And so that's going to cause me problems from doing that. So I have to factor, and if I want to factor, I need to have everything on the same side. This is going to match up pretty close to their worked out example, except for my work over here. So that's the part you might want to copy down to match so you know what to do with this. And so we have x squared minus 4x plus 3 is equal to 0. What am I going to put in the top left-hand corner? Which of these goes in the top left-hand corner? X squared. What goes in the bottom right-hand corner? Positive 3. And remember, our two products have to match. So our product we're looking for is 3x squared. What will they sum up to be? It will match that spot. Negative, oh. And this is always the multiply. This is always the add. So what will multiply to give me a 3x squared that will add to give me a negative 4x? What two things can multiply to give me 3? 3 and 1. And since we need to get a negative 4x, we need to do a negative 3x and a negative 1x. And if you didn't write that 1, it is not wrong. I'm just writing it so we can actually see the number. So what can factor out of that first column? What divides both into x squared and negative x?
X.
What divides into both negative 3x and 3? No, it is negative 3 because the 3 can divide into both 3 and 3. And so when we factor out the first row, we see that you have both an x that can come out of the first row. And on the next one, a 1 can divide into both of those. And so it's a 1, not 1x, 1. And what is my sign of my closest? So I have a negative here. So when I factor it, it's going to be x minus 3, x minus 1. And it really doesn't matter the order there, but you do want to set each of those equal to 0. And so x is equal to 3 and x is equal to 1. And then when we write our answer, it's going to be x is equal to 1 comma 3. Now, I want you to look at Angela's and see what did she do wrong. So what did Angela do wrong? What did she not do that we had done before?
She didn't add or subtract 7 from both sides.
She didn't move the 7 over. Because we don't have that zero product rule when we don't have a zero product or a zero answer. So we can't use this unless this is 0 over here. So it should have been x squared plus 6x minus 7 is equal to 0. Because yes, 7 is either 1 or 7, but we don't know which one of these would end up being the 1 and which ones would be the 7, and it throws off things. And so now we need to factor that. What goes in the top right-hand corner? Or is it top left-hand corner? What goes in the bottom right-hand corner?
7.
Negative 7. And so the product is? What sum am I looking for this time? It's always this middle. So a positive 6x.
Okay.
That's where that always comes from. And so I want to find two things that will multiply to give me negative 7x squared that will add to give me a positive 6x. So what's two things that can multiply to give me 7?
7 and 1.
7 and 1. If I add 7 plus 1, I get 8. And if I multiply them, I get a positive 7x squared. So what do we need to make one of them?
A negative.
Which one do you think needs to be made negative? The 1x or the 7x? Because we want it to be a positive 6. So negative 1x and positive 7x. What can come out of this first column? What do they share? They share an x. In the second column, what do they share?
1.
A 1, and it's negative because my sign closest was negative. In the first row, what do they share?
X.
In my second row,
7.
and it's positive because my sign closest is positive. So x minus 1 times x plus 7 is equal to 0. And so either x minus 1 equals 0 or x plus 7 equals 0. And so x is either equal to 1 or x equals negative 7. How about Dwight? What did Dwight not do?
Can you go back?
Yes. So Dwight, you said, did not move the 6 to the other side. So when we do that, what do we come up with?
X squared plus 5x. That's it.
Because the 6's cancel out. When we move it over, it becomes 6 minus 6, and that cancels out completely. So this time, I don't have that constant. I don't have that number without a variable. If that is ever the case, you don't have to use this. You can, there's a way to use it, but you don't have to. If you use it, you only need one row. So we want to think about what can I bring out of the x squared and the 5x?
An X.
I can bring out an x, and that'll leave me x plus 5 is equal to 0. And I set those two equal to 0. And then one that everybody always forgets to do is this guy here. They always forget to set him equal to 0. And then x is equal to -5 and 0. I want y'all to do the next two, A and B. So on that first one, do I have to do anything extra? So I just go straight to my factory. On my factory, I have the x squared here and the 12 here. What am I going to put in the top of my x? What is the product? 12x squared. What is my sum I'm looking for? What two things multiply to give me 12 that will add to give me -8? 6 and 2. And they both need to be negative because we're looking for a -8. Whenever this is positive, these signs will always match. So we have -6x and a -2x. This first column, an x is shared. In the second column, a 6 is shared. And my closest sign is negative. And in the first row, an x is shared. In the second row, a -2 is shared. That's negative because that 2 is there, or because that sign is negative. So my factors are x minus 6 times x minus 2, and that's equal to 0. So I set those factors equal to 0. And so x is equal to 6, or x is equal to 2. And so write them in order, 2, 6. On this second one, do I need to do anything? What, add the 7? Can it combine with the 8?
No.
Because they don't have like terms. So when I use my box, what's going in the upper right-hand corner? What's going in my bottom right-hand corner?
7.
Okay. What is my product?
7x.
What am I looking for a sum?
8.
What two things multiply to give me 7 that would add to give me 8? 7x and 1x. What is shared in this first column? What is the largest number that's shared in the second column? 7. What is shared in this first row? What is shared in the second row?
1.
And my closest sign on both of these is positive. So I have x plus 7 times x plus 1 equals 0. Now once each of those factors equal to 0, and so x is equal to -7, or x is equal to -1. -7 will be listed first. So what is different on C? There's fractions. What else is different? What does it not have?
It doesn't have, like a plus, it's only a plus b, not plus c.
It doesn't have that. It has ax squared plus bx, but it doesn't have that plus c. And so when we're doing this one, we need to make sure that we are considering the fact that it doesn't have that plus c. So do I need to use the box?
No.
No. So what is shared between these two? Is there any part of this 2/3 that I can pull out of here?
X.
Can I pull out a 1/3?
Yeah.
If I pull out a 1/3, I'm left with 2x minus, if I pull out a 1/3, it left me with 5 halves x. If you would have left that 1/3 in there, it wouldn't have hurt things. It just is going to make your life easier. Oh, that's not an x on that second one. I didn't realize I wrote that x. And so we're going to say each of our factors equal to 0. And so when I divide both sides by 1/3, what is x equal to?
Let me get a 1/3.
0 divided by anything is 0. When I move the 5 halves over, it becomes a positive 5 halves on this side. And so I have 2x is equal to positive 1/2, or 5 halves. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And when I'm dividing, remember I'm multiplying by the reciprocal. So x is equal to 5/4. And x is equal to 0. Which one is the smallest of those two? Now let's look at D. Do I have a C?
Yes.
Okay. This one has f of x equals, and up to this point, everything else hasn't. We're still going to be trying to find the roots. The roots are when it crosses 0, or crosses the x-axis. So we're trying to figure out what's happening at 0. So let's see, can I factor this? What would go in my top left-hand corner?
X.
What goes in my bottom right-hand corner?
12.
What is their product?
10x.
12x squared.
or 12x.
And the sum is the 10x. What two things can multiply to give me 12 that will add to give me 10?
2 and 2. Oh, no.
So we have 1 and 12. Is there any way that will add to give me 10?
No.
2 times what? So 2 and 6. Will that add to give me 10? 3 and 4. Will that add to give me 10? Not factorable. This one we cannot factor. And so on Monday, we're going to be looking at problems like this that we can't factor. And we're going to see how to handle them. There's going to be two different methods we're going to look at on Monday. One's going to be called completing the square. The other one is a quadratic formula. The quadratic formula just stems from completing the square. That's where it came from. It's just the shortcut to the completing the square. Some problems, completing the square is easier. Some problems, quadratic formula is easier on those that you can solve that way. And so I'm going to teach you both methods. And you can use whichever one you would like. I want you to look at question 4, and this is homework. I want you to look through it and see what are their different strategies and how do they go through solving them.